And it was a big event on campus. This year, we're all going to be virtual, but all of you will get information on it. Another thing we do is we have software that connects companies to advisors. We call it Health Hub Connect. And if you're not a member, it's a great thing to sign up for. If you're an advisor, if you think you have something to offer to an early stage company, or if you're an early stage company or an inventor and you want you want some help, and log on to the network and ask for the help, and we'll probably find it for you. What else we do at Health Hub is we put on events. Last year we put on about 20 or so events. This year, obviously, quite a few less. Our events are, range from global summits to as I mentioned, what we do with our health awards. And we're obviously moving to webinars this year. Finally, I'm getting right into why we're here today, and we're really excited for this kickoff. So this series is really about the fact that COVID changed everything. I think we all know that, and it's accelerated the move into RPM and into telehealth. And how did we all start this idea? Well, we originally were going to have an event on campus, and the event on campus was about how home technologies were really changing how hospitals treated and managed patients. And we announced it, and we signed up 450 people in 12 hours. But then COVID happened, and we said, well, what are we going to do? We can't obviously have this event. But meanwhile, we realized that the needs for patient engagement were really changing across UCSF. So we changed the one-time event to this bi-weekly activity, so that every 2 weeks, we're going to focus on a different department within the hospital and how telehealth and how remote technologies are impacting the way they've cared patients. And it should be, so this is our kickoff, and this is what we're going to be sort of framing the scene. But next, in 2 weeks, we're going to be focusing on oncology, and we're focusing on cardio. We have orthopedic session. We're pretty excited. So, it's really funny. You sit back, it's not funny. Thanksgiving of this past last year, we were all sitting at the with the stock market at a record high, unemployment at the low, and all of our employees demanding duck confit with fresh Sonoma goat cheese in their cafeteria. And life was like we were living in a world of abundance, and that obviously changed. And now it's life during wartime. And what does it mean? It means actually a few interesting things. Innovation is accelerating, and in part because so much of us are motivated to do so many more things. In part because the monotony of our day-to-day lives is giving us more time to produce. And who would have thought that? But also it's it's our desire to really, it's amazing how we can reach everyone now. It used to be you'd have meetings that would take 2 weeks to get set up, and now you can pretty much reach everyone in a day or two. And that's pretty cool. But there's also this sense of moral collaboration amongst us. We really want to do something. We want to make this disease go away. I want to talk about a few other things before I get into it. And obviously what COVID has done is it's forced us to forget a lot of the old rules, like privacy. What's privacy now? We can't afford to just think about privacy. We have to think about life. And we also have to realize that we have to stop reminiscing about the past. And that old experience of going to the private practice doctor, or seeing the doctor at the tennis club and having that doctor ask you, oh, how's Bob doing? Well, that's probably going to be something of the past. What else? Obviously, we love that our frontline heroes are putting in this type of effort and risking their lives daily, and we cheer them on every day. And we just, from a UCSF perspective, we're obviously, for us not on the front line, all we do is think about our frontline compatriots. The definition of healthcare is changing. It's obviously more remote, more video, less touch. And mental health awareness, obviously increasing, moving to the front burner, and those other non-COVID drug discoveries and app developments and clinical validation trials, well, they've been put on hold. They've been put on the back burner. And yes, they'll come back. But you're either on one side of COVID or another. And I can go on. But here we're really to talk about, actually there's the good of what COVID is doing. And it's really, we're trying to say lemons to lemonades. Look, this all really sucks. We get that. But let's focus on the good and what's coming out of this. And we have a great group today to do this. And these are handpicked, this is our handpicked team. We're going to start with with Ralph Gonzalez, and Ralph is the runs innovation at UCSF Health. And as you'll see, he's got quite a perspective of the change that's going on at UCSF. We have a guest speaker, Xiao Hu. Xiao is ex-UCSF. He's now at Duke. He was the go-to specialist on remote diagnostics at UCSF, and he's got a great little presentation. Then Daniel Kraft, who's a renowned futurist in healthcare, probably the most famous futurist in America who thinks about healthcare day in and day out. And Paul Grant. And Paul runs MedTech Innovator, which is really the go-to innovation house for medical devices. So here's our format. I'm going to introduce Ralph. Ralph is going to introduce Xiao. And Daniel's really going to paint the future and highlight a number of new services and what's going on in the market. He's going to introduce Paul. Paul's going to set the scene for today's 4 CEO presentations. And we have 4 great companies here. We've handpicked these companies. These companies will each get in here and present for 3 minutes. They'll give you an overview of what they're doing, why it's important. Then you're going to be randomly assigned to one of 4 sessions where one of the moderators is going to be peppering the company CEO with questions and really opening up and how has COVID changed everything and how is the company responding. Then we're going to come back. We're going to have a Q&A session. And then there's going to be an opportunity for you to meet individually with the companies on their own Zoom. And really with that, I'm done. And I'm going to introduce Ralph. And so Ralph Gonzalez, it's all yours.
Thanks, Mark. Let me just get my screen up here. Feeling a little bit cough-ridden here. Trust me, it's not COVID. Thanks, Mark. I'm here today to give you a health system perspective on this COVID epidemic.
You have your full screen. You want to check
what's that? You're not in the full screen?
Well, you want to set up your full screen. We see your speaker.
My notes? Okay, let's see. Let's end show. And then screen share again. And then share screen. And then, all right. How's that look? Better?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm here to give you a health system perspective on what COVID has done to the way we take care of patients and what it's done in terms of how the delivery system responds to this epidemic. COVID-19 has really thrown us a curveball. As Mark said, things were going pretty well at UCSF Health in the way we were managing patients and the way we were bringing innovations to the care of patients and to market. And then COVID hit. And so, you know, what are the features? What is it about COVID that is so different than any other, you know, virus that we've seen come across our plate? And so in contrast to flu, which is the comparison that we normally make, many of you know that COVID is more infectious and much more contagious than the flu. It causes more severe disease, and it causes a higher case fatality rate. But we've seen that before, right? We've seen that with SARS, we've seen that with MERS, we've seen that with Ebola. You know, what's really different about COVID is the incubation period. And the fact that we don't know who has COVID and who doesn't because there's a high proportion of patients who can harbor COVID, can spread COVID, and not have any symptoms, and we don't know who they are. And so this 1 to 14-day incubation period has really thrown us for a loop in terms of being able to contain the spread and to manage this illness and this epidemic. What's different about Ebola and SARS is that when people develop those infections, they don't start spreading the virus until they have the symptoms, and the symptoms are severe. And so those patients are not cruising the bars and the restaurants and spreading it everywhere. They're staying home, they're going to the hospital, and many of them get seriously ill and die. The last thing you want to do if you're a virus and you want to survive is to kill your host. What you want is what coronavirus is doing, where you have a mutual relationship with your host and you can continue to replicate and spread in a way that goes undetected and under the radar. And so this is really, it's really that part of COVID that has led to the downstream effects that you're all recognizing. The first is our healthcare delivery response. The COVID epidemic has led hospitals and clinics to set up tents and mobile testing sites almost overnight. And I think any of you, all of you are probably familiar with these. And the reason for this is that we need to isolate and protect the rest of our healthcare environment from this contagion. What happens in a typical clinic is that if you bring a patient in who you suspect has COVID and they test positive, then you have to shut everything down and do deep cleaning and deep wiping. And so people quickly figured out, well, if we do most of this outside in these tents or do the testing in people's cars instead of in the clinics, that was a safer way to go. And so in addition to the healthcare system shutting down, I mean, the signal that got sent to patients is don't come here unless you really have to. And they didn't, they stayed home. In addition, if you look at the care of patients in the hospital, it's radically different. Patients with COVID are isolated, they don't have visitors, and we're developing a lot of new ways to interact and manage those patients from a distance. And so that has led to some innovation in the hospital, but today we're going to focus mostly in the outpatient setting. And so what's happened now is, as the signal from the hospitals is, only come here if you need to, and we need to isolate you, and we're going to down schedule everything in case we get this surge of patients like New York did. Patients stayed home, and as a result, virtual and remote care really took off. And just to put this in context, we've had basic telehealth capabilities for 20, 30 years, and it's pretty much stayed at about 1% of our total visit. At UCSF Health, where we've been doing some work, it's been more around 2 to 3%. And if you look at the graph on the left, in just 4 weeks during the month of March, we went from about a 3% video visit rate to over 50% of our visits are now video visits. And it's staying up there if you look into our April data. This isn't just UCSF Health, advanced academic medical center with telehealth capabilities. If you look across the country, which is the slide on the right from the Commonwealth Fund, this is 50,000 providers across lots of different outpatient settings across the country. And in a similar fashion, in just 4 weeks, they went from 0 to 30% of all of their visits are now telemedicine visits. And so it's pretty dramatic what happened here. And what's important is that the payers have also lined up. And so before, Medicare was not paying for video visits, they are now. Insurance companies are following through with their payments. A lot of times they didn't. And so now the health systems are scrambling for how do we now take advantage of this new investment and this new commitment to telehealth and help it manage our patients better. The one other repercussion I'll mention that is just fascinating is that in contrast to the video visits rise, the emergency department visits went down. And they've gone down not just a little bit, but a lot. And so this is a great slide from Stony Brook in New York, Stony Brook University Hospital in New York. And their ED, the blue bars represent non-PUIs. This is persons under investigation. So this is basically all the ED visits are in the blue bars, and the red bars represent the COVID investigated visits. And so as the COVID epidemic started to go up and those people were coming into the ED, you can see the blue bars start shrinking in size so that the total volume really didn't change as you get to the peak. The problem is that now that they got over the peak and the ED visits are going down for COVID in the red, the blue bars never came back. So how is it that these emergency departments are now managing 50% of their previous volumes? It's hard to believe, and we're beginning to understand that there's a lot of people with complex medical conditions who might have gone to the emergency department who are staying home, and we're trying to manage them at home. And that represents a real challenge for us. And so the last point I'll make here in terms of why, what is it that we're trying to solve as we move the hospital to the home, because this isn't going to change very quickly. And it's really it's the illness trajectory of patients that makes managing them so tricky with COVID. And the reason for that is really shown nicely on this slide, that the typical course for most people with COVID, if they develop symptoms, and again, some people don't, but those that develop symptoms will be sick for about a week. And they'll have the fever, the cough, they'll get a little bit of shortness of breath. And then the majority of them will get better. But there's about a third that suddenly will crash, and they go to the ED, their lungs fill up with fluid, and they end up on a mechanical ventilation and an intensive care unit. Understanding how to anticipate who's going to crash and who's not is really a really key part of what health systems are trying to manage right now in safely sending people home. And it's the reason for this session that we're having today. And so to summarize, I think the burning platform I've been trying to paint for you from our current state has the following takeaways. The first is that there's a lot of uncertainty in how long this epidemic is going to last, and there's a lot of unpredictability in how the illness is going to evolve with our patients, and that's creating a lot of fear. And that fear has led health systems to make it much more challenging for patients to come in to get seen, and it's led patients to basically stay home and try to manage their illness at home. And in particular, it's those patients with not just with COVID, but also with chronic medical conditions that we need to learn how to manage, because they're not going to the ED anymore when they have their exacerbations. And so the third takeaway is that we need to move past 20th century medicine. And this is leading into what Xiao is going to talk about, but we still today manage patients with acute illness using vital signs and algorithms that were developed 50 years ago. We use binary cutoffs on blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation. We use algorithms that are very simplistic, if you will, given what we can do now with computational science. And so we need to start bringing this into the 21st century. And so I'm going to finish with some questions for Xiao, who's going to speak next, and as well as for our subsequent speakers and experts. So one is, how should we be monitoring COVID-19 patients when we send them home? Is there a role for artificial intelligence and machine learning approaches to create better algorithms? And is there a patient-facing platform that can integrate video, device monitoring, and other patient-generated data so that we can more seamlessly and efficiently monitor and manage patients from a distance? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Xiao.
Thanks, Ralph. Let me share my screen and get it started. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So thanks for this opportunity to be a guest speaker for this wonderful event. So what I'm going to do is to provide a perspective from an algorithm and academic research perspective. As Mark said, yes, I'm now actually with Duke University, but I spent almost 20 years within UC, first as a graduate student in biomedical engineering program, UCLA, and then faculty members at both UCLA and UCSF. So my overarching goal of my program research is to develop algorithms to distill actionable information from electronic health record, as well as various medical devices, including patient monitors. So no doubt, this is a very challenging time for everyone. But I believe the field of remote patient monitoring have risen to this challenge by a dedication to bring innovation and products timely to the market with all these sensors, wearable solutions on screen, and many more you will hear and see today, we can monitor many aspects of human physiology and activity in a non-intrusive way. So this is a tool we're going to bring to fight this pandemic and illness. Now, with this accelerated development in an ambulatory setting, I think it's also important for us to be aware of what has been going on for the last 50 years in the inpatient monitoring. In particular, let's be aware of some of the mistakes we have made and see if we can address this new field of remote patient monitoring. I think it's okay that we can use the patient monitors in the hospital as a gold standard to validate the accuracy of the raw measurement like ECG. But we need to be aware that as a total solution, the inpatient physiological monitoring isn't deliver the best experience for our healthcare providers and isn't doing what it's supposed to do. And one of the fundamental reasons for this is because the algorithms that is used by the patient monitors to analyze the physiological data operates in an isolated fashion. So when you analyze the ECG strip for a patient, you are not aware of all the other information in the EHR about the drug, about the procedures. And this suboptimal way of processing the data creates an imprecise patient monitor alarm, as well as operates in a reactive fashion. So we cannot predict upcoming deteriorations. We can only detect them, and when that's too late. And to give you a more concrete example, let me walk you through a UCSF study that was done now 7 years ago by my nursing colleague, Barbara Ju, who is featured in this San Francisco Chronic front page. So in the months of 2013 March, we collected every single alarm from patient monitors by 77 adult ICU beds at UCSF. And in that month, there were 2.5 million alarms being collected, and that translates into one alarm every 90 seconds. Now, the team also spent lots of time annotating 12,000 alarms from 6 different kinds of critical ECG arrhythmia. And as you can see, the precision of those algorithms were very, very poor. So what I want to say is that patient monitoring does not mean we have to only use patient monitoring. So in the acute care settings, there are a lot more information we should bring into monitoring patients from the EHR. But one of the challenges of integrating all this information all this data that is available into an algorithm has been challenged by a diverse heterogeneous forms of the data. So in the past 7 years, I have been developing a unified algorithm framework that can be utilized to integrate all these different kinds of data. So the key idea there is we came up with this idea that we can represent all these different kinds of data as tokens. With this unified representation of very complex data sets, then we can bring lots of machine and AI techniques to bear upon problems of prediction, of detection. And the best thing is that for the remote patient monitoring, we can apply the same technology. And in this case, there are a lot more richer data that we can bring to bear upon the patient monitoring in the remote setting. So to conclude, I want to offer some suggestions to the field from academic perspective. So first, there are lots of exciting developments in the sensor field. So I think pretty soon we can say, modalities beyond ECG, beyond the PPG that we are familiar with. I think it's very important to incentivize the pursuit of high accuracy through algorithm innovations to avoid the false alarm issue. And because we're gonna see a lot more algorithms coming to the market, I think it's also very important to standardize what I call the algorithm labeling, just as we label the drugs. And in this practice, will make it easier for companies to sell, but the hospital to compare and different offerings, and then can make a quicker and informed purchase decisions. And be able to label those algorithms. I also think we need to have community-wide effort to build a data set that can be trusted by a third party, benchmarking effort to look at, evaluate, all these core algorithms for the RPM. And as Mark said, with this current COVID-19 situation, we can really work together and accelerate all these efforts. So with that, I conclude my presentation and I can give over this to Dan.
Great, thank you. I think I'm next up. Hi, I'm Daniel Kraft. I'm a physician here in the San Francisco area. I had the pleasure of also being a clinical attending at UCSF for several years on pediatric bone marrow transplantation. And I'm going to try in the next 12 minutes or so give a brief overview of how we're heading from hospital to home. Where's technology taking us? What's the convergence? How do we use this opportunity to reshape and reimagine healthcare through the sort of crisis of the coronavirus element, and understanding that disruption has been around us in many fields. It's been coming to healthcare in a variety of ways, and the COVID-19 pandemic is, again, accelerating that in interesting ways. So we were already starting to make that move from hospital or to home hospital. Many patients are admitted directly to home for simple things like pneumonias or other elements where they might just need antibiotics, and that's being enabled by a slew of technologies and incentives. But we really have the opportunity as well to use this shifting era to move to real healthcare in the home, not just the sick care element. And that in the time of COVID means we can also take care of COVID patients in new ways. Our old model, a sick care model, of course, has been based on intermittent episodic data that you usually only get in the hospital, in the ER, in the clinic. And that has led to our classic reactive health sick care system, where we wait for the heart attack, the stroke, the cancer to advance at late stage, or the pandemic to arrive on our doorstep. And I think the opportunity in our new connected digital age is to be much more continuous, proactive, personalized, and now bring care anytime, anywhere, arguably at lower cost, and to democratize that access from rural California to rural Rwanda. And to move that needle, not just for optimizing prevention, diagnostics, and therapy, but again to the whole prevention side on the pandemic equation. So our opportunity now, again, is to cross the healthcare paradigm and reimagine things and use this time when HIPAA's being relaxed, telemedicine's exploding, to do things differently. Of course, a lot of what we're able to do now is riding Moore's law and many exponential technologies. It's accelerating what was coming soon, 5 years from now to now. And a lot of that is coming to the home, to our phone, to on and inside our bodies. The era of healthcare IoT, Internet of Medical Things, is now riding 5G in many parts of the country. And of course, the challenge is not just having the technology. Now we also have lots of new data that can come from our homes, our wearables, our genomics. It's often quite siloed. We are seeing some of these data sets now being more interactive. We're creating much more data, whether it's around the pandemic itself to healthcare behaviors. The big challenge we have across this new era is to move from data to information, actionable information. When we have that, whether it's how to intubate a patient or to manage them at home, to narrow that gap between transmitting that to clinicians, patients, caregivers around the world, not in that usual 17 years. That's the classic time from discovery to general translation. So again, the trend is to move from the classic four walls to the home or anywhere we might be. It's also being augmented by what's possible our corner pharmacies, which in many cases are battling it out with primary care clinics to become a part of our connected home care models. Many examples of that have emerged. Of course, we're now in the era of digital, mobile, connected health, which really gives us the opportunity to take these exponential data sources, individualize them, and create whole new sets of apps and services around them, many of which you in the audience have been building. We'll hear some from some of the great startups shortly. So, and of course, it's not just about digital, it's all the things that are coming together from genomics, sequencing, big data, AI, robotics, VR, AR, that super convergence that's giving us the opportunity to do things differently, and the convergence of new players. I'm lucky to be heading up the task force for the XPRIZE Pandemic Alliance. So it's bringing folks who didn't collaborate before together new ways to address the grand challenges we have across this pandemic, but across healthcare in general, from triage to frontline capacity to PPE, to clinical infrastructure, to data interoperability. So a lot of new energy, and some of the silver lining of this pandemic is all the new folks are coming together. Okay, so we're talking about what can happen at home. I think you all are aware of wearables, but to put it in perspective, it's only been 11 years since the first Fitbit came out. Now we have an explosion of different devices that are many becoming not just consumer-based, but medicalized. It can pick up, as Xiao mentioned, almost every element of physiology and behavior. And we're clearly moving into sensors 3.0, patches that can give you an intensive care unit level of data. But we can use them in even simple ways at home. You may not admit the patient at all, or just have a patient who's gone home very early from a procedure like a hip implant. This is work from Stefano Bini at UCSF. You can tell from their simple step data, are they doing better or are they doing worse? So simple ways to triage folks using small data. It doesn't need to be complex to look at their trend lines. Or patients who have cancer, you can look at their performance activity also through simple wearables and better triage them and understand what they might need before they know they need it. So big picture, connected to our healthcare at home, is moving from our sort of siloed, quantified self where the data sticks on our little medical devices and talks to our smartphones, quantified self, shifting that now to quantified health, where that data is starting to flow to our healthcare provider, to our hospital system, into our payers as well, to big data sets, hopefully in smart anonymized ways, which enable us to do better measurement, pick up the patient with COVID who needs to be triaged differently, to do early diagnostics, whether it's cancer, COPD, diabetes, and then therapy, much more connected with feedback loops that can be done in the privacy of our own homes to manage care in smarter, lower cost ways. And of course, there's an explosion of new ways to pick up everything from blood pressure in seamless ways with radar to insidables that are CE marked. A Bay Area company, Profusa, is on the market. The idea of breathables to pick up our molecules in our breath, sniff out cancer or maybe COVID. The idea now of this Internet of Medical Things getting so cheap that you can have a pack of 10 of these, I call them underwearables from Spire, which is a company that's pivoted from the consumer space to medical with now the change in remote patient monitoring codes, which are changing incentives and how and where we can bill for things, which of course ties into almost every element of care. The incentives need to be aligned. And now we might use these in a patient with COVID, tracking the respiratory status and know when we might need to advance their care to visit the ER before they need an acute intubation. And then we're entering also the time of invisibles. Our censored homes, the cameras now, like technology from Cocoon Health, can pick up vital signs just with machine learning and cameras. There's other groups that are doing that on our smartphones. So again, not needing to wear anything will give us the ability to connect and pick up vital signs on an almost continuous basis. So our digital exhaust can be collected. Even our behaviors can be picked up by our phone. So folks who want to age in place, are they upright? Are they drinking? Are they dressed? That can all be told by your cameras. And then of course, voice can be another biomarker. Voice has been shown to pick up signs of early heart disease. It's now being looked at to see if there's a sound that folks have in their voice when they have COVID or COVID cough, corona cough. Several apps and academic groups are trying to appify that kind of element. We can use Wi-Fi to pick up the vital signs of multiple people in the same house. So even their sleep patterns, their behavioral patterns, all that can be used to go from hospital to home. How is someone doing? What are their behaviors like? Are they moving around the house? And do that in hopefully privacy-centric ways. So now our digital exhaust is collectible. The challenge is, what do we do with that? The solutions may be there, but the workflow has to be in play, right? We already know we're already overwhelmed as clinicians with EMRs. We need to build in the workflow elements, and the alarm fatigue needs to go away so these things can be useful, particularly when we're in the outpatient and home environment. So just because I can connect my Apple Health data to my doctor at Stanford, which I can do today, doesn't mean he's going to know what he can do with that Fitbit data or my Apple Watch data. So we're starting to see projects like Verily do the baseline trial, start to make sense of what does our digital exhaust mean in the real world. I think that as that emerges will become really integral to our hospital home, create this idea of predictalytics. How is the patient doing? Giving them a bit of a FICO score that integrates multiple data streams. I always use the kind of analogy of the OnStar for the body, the check engine for the light, check engine light for the individual, so that we can synthesize multiple data streams using AI machine learning tuned to the individual to make that useful. And some of those integrated symbols may give us that early flu trend. Can a Fitbit spot the flu? Well, that was work that's already started a while ago. Now we're seeing several groups look at that for, can a wearable, this is out of Scripps, pick up COVID? And then it might be using, in our era now of contact tracing, our social graph and others to let us know in the future, if we get back to shaking hands, who you might want to shake hands with or not, based on that integration of data.
Very famous guy.
Someone's got to mute themselves. How do then we take that data, make it useful in the home? We're not going to have your nurse or physician there. Digital coaching has emerged. Voice-based interactivity is clearly already clearly on the rise. We can blend in VR and AR. Mental health is blending with this. Physical therapy can be done at home now, guided and incentivized by virtual reality. And then, of course, the whole realm of diagnostics that can be done in the home. Diagnostics and monitoring, because if you admit someone to home, you want to not just diagnose them, but monitor them as they go forward. And monitoring crosses a whole element. If we're just talking about COVID right now, our at-home devices, from pulse oximeters to your mobile phone, can be done to pick up early signs of coronavirus. Can we then take the data-driven insights to understand how that relates to an individual patient, maybe even based on their genomic and other risks, and how then we connect that data to public monitoring so we can find hotspots in neighborhoods or otherwise to use that for public health initiatives. And so, of course, monitoring and diagnosis crosses the spectrum of, can you find someone before they got it who's susceptible, identify them based on multiple risk factors, understand who's been exposed by things like contact tracing and exposure notification. If someone is early in their infectious disease course, understanding what elements from their pulse oximetry to their respiratory rate to the sounds of the cough might be element. And then even folks who've recovered, even if they've been admitted to UCSF or Stanford, how do we monitor them to understand how they're doing? And now we have, of course, these digital doctor bag tools that are now becoming consumer tools. In the audience is Ram Fish, who's the founder of Gale, or 19 Labs. They've built, quarantine at home, video monitoring, integrated systems, leveraging existing technologies, connecting the dots so the patient and the clinician can sort of do that clinical visit. And of course, there's an explosion of these devices on the market, like TytoCare, echo stethoscopes that you can have to upskill the ability to do heart sounds, pocket ultrasounds that patients can have, all the explosion in digital watches and EKGs, like a LiveCourse Pioneer that can pick up elements. So bottom line, all these things that used to take a hospital can now be done at home, including many laboratory tests. Several examples of those are going to only explode onto the scene. Even, of course, home-based tests for picking up coronavirus. Several initiatives are going to be hopefully approved pretty soon. And all the way to transitioning things like the medical selfie. I'm on the board of Healthy.io, an Israeli company. They're able now to dip your urine dipstick, take that urine dipstick, instead of bringing the urine to the lab, use your smartphone and the analytics there to understand, do you have protein in your urine? Do you have a urinary tract infection? And then prescribe that antibiotic, which then will be delivered by Amazon or by drone in the near future. In the last minute, of course, we need to connect all these dots. All this new data is overwhelming to the clinician. We're seeing, of course, AI dermatology, radiology, all that explode onto the scene. The trick is to put all these things together in empowering ways. There's examples like diagnostic robotics out of Israel that's hot spotting, using wearable data, public health information, so that we can better make triage tools. And so if you do have a patient admitted to home with infectious disease or something else, you can better triage them and keep them at home before they need more advanced care. And of course, as has been mentioned, telemedicine's exploded on the scene for virtual health and beyond. So I'm running out of time. I'll just mention briefly, the challenge with all these tools that are out there is, how do we make sense of them? How do we utilize them? I recently founded Digital.Health, which I hope you guys will check out. It's still early stages. And the ability there is to find basically a digital health formulary, whether it's wearables or apps or devices or diagnostic tools that eventually can be prescribed and hopefully paid for, and that data can come back. I'll close with discovery. Particularly in the era of COVID, we need to advance our clinical trials, whether it's trying things like hydrochloroquine, not Clorox, to do trials at home to understand what drugs will be useful earlier in clinical courses. How do we crowdsource all of that to build essentially a bit of a Waze or Google Maps for pandemic disease, but also many of the acute and chronic diseases that will be taken care of more and more at home. So with that, I'll thank you for your time and attention, and we'll look forward to hearing from Paul Grand, who I'm going to pitch it off to next, who's going to do a little bit of framing and introduce you to several exciting startups that are in the hospital to home space. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Daniel. Terrific presentation, as always. I always say, like, if you just want to learn about everything that's happening in healthcare, you have about 30 minutes. Daniel will tell you everything there is to know. So thank you, Daniel, for doing that. Terrific presentation. So hi, everyone. I'm Paul Grand. I'm the CEO of a company called MedTech Innovator. I also will share a couple slides just to give you a little background and set the context for what I do and kind of what we're looking at going forward in the rest of today's event in terms of companies. So let me just quickly tell you myself as a background. I was an entrepreneur. I started 8 different companies in tech, pharma, med tech, became a VC. I was a venture capitalist for 12 years, which was terrific. And about 8 years ago, while I was a VC, I started MedTech Innovator, and the idea was to find startups that really had the promise of actually being successful and make sure they're actually successful, and eliminating the barriers that are in the way for those companies. So let me just very quickly share a couple slides, and then we'll get to today's companies. So MedTech Innovator is a nonprofit. We spun it out in 2016 as a standalone company, and the mission is to improve the lives of patients by accelerating the growth of companies that are transforming healthcare. And the reason I point to this particular slide is you're seeing the graduating class of last year's MedTech Innovator cohort, but behind them are the pictures of their predecessors, the products that they've brought to the market. And that's what this is really all about. MedTech Innovator is not about ideation. We're trying to find the startups that are more downstream, that are actually out there, that have teams, that have products that are in development, and we work with the industry. So with leaders like Baxter and Johnson & Johnson and Olympus and so on, we bring together all the corporates and the strategics who have a need to bring these products to market as well. And we bring them together with the leading startups. And the idea is to make sure that the startups don't fail. That's really the whole goal here, is to make sure these technologies reach patients and with the appropriate value. We're very good at it. We've been doing this, as I said, for 8 years. We do most of this virtually. Our companies, we have 258 companies who've gone through our programs, who've gone on after MedTech Innovator to raise $1.6 billion in follow-on funding. There's 11 acquisitions that have happened. But more importantly, we have 54 products on the market, 74 regulatory approvals, and a lot more coming behind that. So super exciting. But one of the things that I like to do is always take a second and kind of back up and say, all right, you got this great technology, you got a huge unmet need. Why might your startup fail in ways that are preventable? And there's a piece you could Google in Stat News. You can just type in 10 reasons why healthcare startups fail and do a little Googling, and you'll find this article that I wrote with my COO, Catherine Zavala, not too long ago. But basically the idea was to kind of identify 10 areas that we thought were preventable, that these are reasons that you don't have to fail, that we see happen all the time, over and over and over again. I'm not going to go into the details now. Google it, find the article, and you'll see what we're talking about. Again, we want you to succeed. We want startups to succeed. So today's event, you heard the setup from Mark in the beginning, hospital to home, and everyone's kind of carried this theme all the way through to where we are now in the program, which is to really talk about technologies, in particular, how these technologies can be deployed, how they are being deployed, how you can access them, and understand a little more about, maybe some lessons learned along the way. So you can see our URL at the bottom, medtechinnovator.org, if you want to learn more about MedTech Innovator, and contact us after this. So stopping the share, I'm going to get back now to kind of what we're trying to do again with the rest of the program today. So very important, what we do at MedTech Innovator, I mentioned before, is we find the best startups no matter wherever they are in the world, and we bring them to people who need to know about them and who need to be there in these startups' path to patients and to being successful in the market. It's not just about bringing a product to regulatory approval, it's about achieving scale, validation. These are things that you just cannot do on your own. It takes an ecosystem, it takes a village, whatever phrase you want to use, to bring these products to success. And so what we do is we'll do events that are kind of like this one. We've done a dozen of these since March in the last, COVID era. We've had these all over the world virtually, where we've had hundreds of startups present, as we're going to do today. And again, the idea is to assemble people who are experts or who could be potentially partners with these companies or customers or whatever it might be, and make sure you have access to them. So you're going to meet 4 startups in a little bit that are focused on this remote patient monitoring and telehealth space. And the idea is for you to learn a little bit about their technologies, for you to understand a little bit about the data and the success they've had in terms of how they're working with patients so far and what they're seeing. None of these are vaporware. None of these are people with ideas. These are all products that are deployed, that are available, that you can learn more about. And that's the goal of today, is for you to learn more about these technologies. We're going to have all 4 of them give short presentations. If we were to have them all give a full long presentation, this would go on for another couple hours, and I don't think we can do that. So instead, through the magic of Zoom, we're going to have each of these companies give a 3-minute presentation here to the main room. And then after they're finished, we're going to break up into breakout rooms where the startups will also do a longer Q&A with each of the different moderators that are here today. And you'll be able to do some Q&A with them as well. So you'll be able to type questions into Zoom. We'll ask those questions. So that's what's going to happen. That's the format that's coming up. As I mentioned, each of the startups will give a presentation. They're 3 minutes long. After all that's over, after the breakouts are done, there's also the ability to follow up and do enter another Zoom with those companies, and the meeting host will tell you more about that after we're done. But again, I encourage you, reach out to these startups. So, don't just listen to the presentations today and take some notes and then say, okay, that was interesting. If you have a resource, if you have a hospital system where one of these products, should be working with your patients and should be deployed to your community, reach out to these companies. If you have a technology solution that could be a good partner for any of these companies, reach out to the companies. If you're an investor, reach out to these companies. These are all real companies with real traction, and they're really compelling. So enough of that. Let's get to the startups. We're going to have all 4 of them do their presentations. I guess we can go first with Conversa Health. And what I'll do is I'll just have each presenter introduce themselves, run their 3-minute presentation, and then we'll run on to the next one. As I said, we're not going to do Q&A right now. That will happen after this part of the program. So if we want to start off first with Conversa Health.
You guys see my screen?
We can, Murray. Yep. So I'm going to mute myself and let you introduce yourself.
All right, Paul, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for having us. I'm Murray Brozinsky, CEO of Conversa Health. We are a virtual care platform that's designed to engage patients for the purpose of driving better outcomes. And simply put, in the 3 minutes we have here, we take data, EMR data, we take sensor-based data, we take patient-reported outcome data, and we take all of that data, turbocharge it with behavioral science to drive better outcomes. And here's a visual of sort of how it works. So we integrate deeply with the EMR, make sense of that data, develop a profile for the patient, and then we reach out to the patient. We collect anything that can be collected through a sensor, anything a patient can tell us, validated answers, as well as informal Q&A. And all of that is used to determine whether the patient is on track in their care journey, whatever that journey is. If they're on track, provide personalized motivation for them to continue. If they're off track, we nudge them back on track, fully automated. And if they're off track and need to be escalated to a scarce care team resource, we get them to a telehealth visit or get them to an in-person visit or a phone call that's necessary. So it's automated, personalized conversations designed to manage patients remotely. And the problem we're solving is pretty obvious. All the other speakers talked about it, really moving to this continuous automated future where patients are really actively involved. We're taking the wisdom of the patient and really bringing it to bear. So only 15 to 20% of outcomes are determined by clinical data. A lot of it is behavioral, social determinants, clinical data that's subject to change very rapidly. So we collect all that and we make automated decisions and allow it to be done personalized to change behaviors. And so it's all about, as Ralph talked about, making patient-generated health data actionable. We are deployed at lots of different places. We're honored to be working with UCSF Health. We've got lung transplant programs and IBD programs. We've got programs in all these wonderful health systems and many growing by the month. And all of these patients are on chronic care programs, acute programs, pre and post-surgical, cancer, OBG. It's really designed to manage patients remotely, especially in the new world of COVID, which we'll talk about, to really be able to do as much as you can in an automated way, low cost, better experience, lower burden and burnout on the providers and improving outcomes. So real quickly, some of our outcomes. Our satisfaction rates and our engagement rates for patients are really off the charts. We're really reducing burden and burnout on the providers. Hard outcomes, we've reduced readmission rates that were already low in a study, 32% of all-cause readmissions by using this platform. We've been able to improve adherence substantially. These are cancer patients that are reporting adverse effects much more readily through these programs, and we're able to keep them on treatment longer. Procedures, we can really drive behavior to have people show up for procedures like colonoscopy, not by reminding them, but by understanding their concerns and their issues and collecting all the information and driving them to overcome them. All of that was BC before COVID. And now we also, our new mantra is helping patients and providers stay connected without getting infected. And this is what we'll talk about in the breakout session. We'll talk about the sort of the suite of COVID programs we quickly put together with this very flexible platform that's really helping health systems manage in the new age of COVID directly. And also all the programs I showed you are obviously more important because those are all these vulnerable patient populations that need virtual care more than ever. So thank you very much. I'm gonna just throw this back up here in case you're not randomly assigned to our session. Please feel free to reach out to me. My email's on here and you can go to our website and see all the programs and products that we have to offer. Thank you.
Terrific. Great job, Murray. Thank you very much. So I guess we can turn off Murray's slides or you can turn them off. So very good. So, you know, super interesting. You know, that's a space that, you know, as you heard recently, there's there's been a huge growth and a huge upswing in virtual visits and in telehealth in general. And Conversa is definitely a company that you want to learn more about. So I encourage you, if you're not in the breakout session after this, to reach out directly to Conversa. All right, next we're going to have GraftWorx tell us about their product. So if you want to go ahead and queue up your slides. All right, Dave.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave. I'm the CEO of GraftWorx, and thank you very much for being here this afternoon. So what GraftWorx is focused on is building a remote monitoring platform, which is focused on bringing clinically actionable data for high-risk and vulnerable patients. And where we focus on is ease of use for both the patient and the clinician. So I think we're one of the few companies that enjoys hearing our patients and our users say we forgot we were even wearing it. I think that's really important. All that data is collected passively. They don't have to interact with it. That's fed through a hub, which sits inside their home. It's important for the patient populations that we're working with. They tend to be low socioeconomics and others, and so we need to make sure that we can get that data as we need. And that's pushed out on the clinician side. Once again, it's not a large dashboard that the clinician needs to look at every day. It's actually focused on alerts that they can actually fit in their current clinical workflow. And once again, why we focus on some of these key high-risk, vulnerable patient populations. That's even reflected in the metrics that we're able to generate. So we generate a lot of metrics that right now are kind of spread across multiple different products. We pull all of that into one setting, one wearable, and the focus once again is on keeping these patients out of the hospital. These are folks that are typically in any given year, maybe they're getting hospitalized. 40% of them will go hospitalized for heart failure in a given year, and that's a big issue that we can tackle and once again tackle remotely. I think there was something that was brought up before as well, as you have to be accurate, right? And that's something that we focus on, is being just as accurate, if not better than the current standard of care and very close to the gold standard. That's allowed us to build, and our focus I think I like the before COVID BC was very much on the cardiorenal world and building a platform for that. And then also layering on the algorithms to how do you just not get the metrics, but then how do you also help titrate care? How can you also understand the leading indicator for changing a heart failure drug or titrating the amount of drug, or if it's a dialysis patient, how do you titrate the amount of dialysis they might need so the patient's getting the appropriate care each and every day rather than just seeing their clinician once a month or once a quarter. And that's a little bit of where COVID kind of came into the world for us. We saw an ability to, our response to help flatten the curve, bring some of our vitals monitoring there earlier, once again, these high-risk patients, and be involved in that test, trace, and isolate manner for what we could do. We could kind of get this to market a bit quicker and help out. And we're really excited about some of the partners that we've been working with the NHS and groups in Texas and the military as well, that we've been deploying this already. And then now some of the folks that we're building into over the next few months as well as part of our COVID response. So once again, excited to talk a little bit more later about what we're doing and how we could potentially work with some of you on bringing this to more people and helping them stay out of the hospital and treat them at home. Thanks.
Terrific, Dave. Thank you very much. It's terrific to see how far GraftWorx has come. So congratulations on the great work you're doing. Next up, Spry Health. So another company in the RPM space. So PJ, if you want to bring up your slides.
Let's do it. Thanks a lot, everybody, for being here today. So I'm PJ, I'm CEO and founder of Spry Health. We're a remote monitoring company. And the first thing I really want to talk to you about is what we believe to be true in order to make remote monitoring effective, which is first and foremost, that has to work for the patient. It's really, really critical to get their buy-in. And so it has to deliver value to them, but it also has to take into account their constraints. And so that's something that we've really held as a strong belief really since the beginning. And then the second, and this alludes a little bit to what Daniel was talking about before, it has to be data-driven, not to put to do a data dump on the physician, but rather to derive true information and insight that makes the work of the clinician easier. That's really critical as well. And so the solution that we've built basically does exactly that. And it's really a solution that we built for a chronic respiratory use case. The software that we deploy with healthcare organization basically risk stratifies patients based on their level of risk, based on signs of deterioration. And it's powered by a simple wearable. The simplest way to think about this is it's a medical Fitbit. It's as easy as a Fitbit, set it and forget it type experience. It's on the wrist, it's simple, it looks consumer, but it is a Class 2 medical device that was cleared last year to monitor what is actually the most applicable data for a COVID-19 use case. So monitors SpO2, respiration rate, heart rate. And so in the era of silent hypoxia, really, really important data to collect. And so it does this completely passively, hundreds of data points per day, and was designed particularly for older users that are at risk because of age, because of chronic conditions, and it actually works. So patients like it, they use it almost close to 90% of the time, so really, really high adherence. And I'll just mention as part of this presentation that we actually did all of our clinical validation work with UCSF, and that's really the data that went into our FDA clearance. And so how does this work fundamentally? How do you deploy this? Very simple 4-step process. First, prescribe. So it's prescribed to individuals that are either at higher risk because of age or comorbidities or just suspected of COVID-19. It works right out of the box. We monitor. It's very simple. Set it and forget it. No training required. We start to analyze the data as soon as the user puts it on. And then we detect these subtle changes in the physiology. And then obviously the last bit is the clinical intervention, which is either done by the partner organization through their nursing staff or care management staff, or we can do it ourselves as well, because we realize that clearly the health system right now is overburdened. And so we just want to make sure that we can provide something that is turnkey and makes life easier and not the other way around. And then what I really want to share with you is actually a story rather than just data. And this is a story of a patient with mild COPD that we had enrolled in a program with Providence Healthcare. A man in their late 60s with mild COPD that was enrolled in our program mid-July. We gave them a wearable, started to track the data. About a month later, we see some small changes in their respiratory rate at rest, a small dip in SpO2, which flags them quote unquote red in our system and triggers a call by the nurse. The nurse calls the patient can't really feel anything different, so the nurse decides to check in on them again a couple of days later. And sure enough, a couple of days later, the patient can actually report that there is a change in symptoms that he's perceiving, a little more short of breath. And so as a result of the physiological data, as well as these observations by the nurse, antibiotics are prescribed, the treatment starts, and a few days later, things get back to normal. And so this is really a representative story, that is highlighting the best use case really for remote monitoring and for our technology in particular, because it's all very simple. It's done on the phone. And then most importantly, the patient has a good outcome. And so I want to finish with just mentioning a few of our clinical partners I already mentioned. We've done all our validation with UCSF. Our first deployment was with Providence. And then in the next few weeks, we're going to be announcing a new partnership with one of the Blue Cross Blue Shield health plans. So thank you very much for your time. I'm at pj@sprihealth.com. Feel free to email me anytime with questions or comments. Always welcome those. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, PJ. Once again, really impressive to see how far Spry has come, and amazing to see what you're able to do, right now, what kind of patients you're able to serve. This is, it's really impressive in general. So I'm going to bring up next our fourth startup, which is Current Health, another company in this important remote patient monitoring space. If you want to go ahead and share your slides, Chris, and then we can discuss right after that.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you all. My name is Chris McCann. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Current.Health. I'll say right off the bat that I'm blessed with the strongest Scottish accent imaginable, and Zoom has not yet invented closed captioning for the Scottish accent, so please just bear with me. Current.Health is a platform for continuous health monitoring, disease detection and care management for hospital systems spread across both the United Kingdom and the United States. We're about 60 people just now. We're based both in Boston and then in Edinburgh in Scotland, hence my crazy strong accent. Raised about 25 million in VC, and then at the bottom just listed some of our key clients at the moment. So for example, Mount Sinai in New York, Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, who I'll come on to in a second, Baptist.Health in Kentucky, and then Imperial NHS Trust, who are one of the largest healthcare providers in Europe. We operate across a few different domains, and this actually touches on a few of the points that both Xiao and Dr. Gonzalez brought up. So the first one on the left is the monitoring of the patient. We do continuous monitoring of the patient's core vital signs via a single sensor. I'll come on to in a second. We then provide connectivity to an ecosystem of other devices where there are parameters that we want to monitor but don't get from our wearable. So an example of this might be continuous glucose. Another one is white blood cell count. And then we give the patient an interface through which they report symptoms. So how are they physically feeling? We transmit all of this information back to our platform where we incorporate it with data from the EMR. So for things like symptoms and past medical history. And we use that to try and identify who is the patient in highest risk, who is deteriorating either acutely or who is likely to deteriorate over the coming days. And we make that information available on our dashboards to the care management team or to our own nursing triage service, and then facilitate a video visit back to that patient so that they can assess and intervene with that patient earlier, avoid a readmission, avoid an ED visit, and keep them safely at home. And this has already been used to monitor several thousand patients right now across the US and several hundred COVID-19 patients who have been either triaged at home or on accelerated discharge pathways out of the hospital. So this is our first generation wearable device, which was FDA cleared last year. This continuously monitors their respiration rate, their pulse rate, their oxygen saturation, their temperature, and then their activity levels. And all told, this transmits about 225,000 data points per day. And the purpose of that is not to have someone sit down in front of a computer and stare at all of that information. The purpose is to give much, much deeper insight into what's happening throughout that patient's day, what happens after or before they take medications, what happens when they mobilize and have activity, what happens when they sleep. In a couple of months' time, we'll launch our second wearable, which we've also added EKG, single EKG into. And obviously this is a dramatic size reduction in the first, but still maintains our ability to get this continuous, deep and completely passive insight into the patient's health. But the wearable for us is not really what our solution is. The wearable was just built to give us this continuous insight. The goal is to take that data, and exactly as Xiao actually described it, I couldn't agree more. The vital sign data is just one data point. It needs context that comes from how the patient feels, their past medical history, their demographics, their medication. So we take all of this information together to try and surface for our clients, the hospital system, who that care management team and medical team needs to see. Baptist.Health are one of our clients who operate this across Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois. So they use it for accelerated discharge from hospital of either high-risk patients to COVID-19, so patients with, say, cancer or who are immunocompromised, as well as low to medium risk COVID-19 patients who perhaps don't need to be treated in the hospital. They also use it for home-based triage of COVID-19 patients to avoid admission in the first place. And then BC, I'm going to steal that phrase as well, it's great. BC, it was used more broadly for heart failure, COPD, and oncology screening. With Mayo Clinic, this we announced just last week, the week before last. So with Mayo, our focus is actually on using the biomarker data that we're capturing, the symptoms that we're capturing, to build one of the largest, in fact, the largest data set anywhere in the world of coronavirus and COVID-19 patient biomarker data. So we are deploying this to about 2,000 patients with COVID-19, capturing about 3 million hours worth of labeled data on those patients. And then the goal is to turn that data into a machine learning algorithm which can both detect COVID-19, but then, as Dr. Gonzalez touched on, identify who will develop severe disease and require hospitalization. So that's just a quick speed through us in a very strong Scottish accent. My details are here if you want to reach out, and thank you very much for your time.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. Good. Well, Paul, fantastic setup. Look, we had 4 great companies. Now we're going to go into the separate sessions with the companies, which is really the last planned part of this before we get to our summary. So you are about to now be put into your respective rooms, and we will return shortly. We call it summarizing of the learnings. This is really where all of us moderators are just going to talk amongst ourselves. What, was there anything new that we collectively learned? What came out of this? And Daniel, I'm gonna let you start and tell me some of the thoughts and what did you think?
I'm just impressed always with what's already here. That there's that famous Richard Gibson quote: "The future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed." Even the 4 startups that we heard from are pretty far advanced. And the trick now is how do we integrate this into care? And UCSF is one system. It might be different at a Kaiser or a VA or NHS, but I think all the ingredients are here right now to really reshape healthcare, particularly in the home or wherever we go mobily. And now the dots are being connected on the data side. So I think I'm more and more optimistic about what can happen next. And on the silver lining piece, I think a lot of the learnings and things that are pushed from this COVID crisis will hopefully end up helping a lot more folks than were harmed by the virus in the long term.
Yeah, what I interestingly heard was that from all 4 companies, what COVID did was probably tripled or quadrupled their run rate. They went from these companies that were smaller, sending up a few hospital systems a year, to figuring out how they could handle signing up between 10 and 20 hospital systems. And that's a dramatic change for a system. I know at UCSF, one of the problems has been that a lot of these great companies simply don't have enough product. We sort of have the ventilator problem, especially on the hardware side, really across the board with a lot of these devices, is that there aren't enough of them. They weren't scaled up. But we don't have Ford or General Motors necessarily coming in and helping us out. Interesting outcomes. Paul, you're out there. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts, and just in general.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. No. I think as Daniel was kind of saying, seeing the technology that's out there, I think is the key. He had the William Gibson quote. There's no question that the technology is there in most cases to solve a lot of the challenges that people have today. And the biggest issue is just that people don't know how to access the technology. They don't have it, either at their institution, or they don't understand, they don't know it's out there. Giving another plug to Daniel's, new Digital.Health resource, that doesn't exist besides Digital.Health, as far as I know. It's very hard to find these things. You can Google remote patient monitoring and, hopefully, find a couple news stories about stuff that's out there, but having a catalog place where you can actually go and find the technologies, understand them, this is super important. There's not a lot of really great resources for that. There's starting to be digital formularies, and we're starting to see some of those things too. But ultimately, I think, it's about getting this technology out there and getting it validated. And, it's something that I'm very passionate about is validation, as you know, Mark, and making sure that people have the data they need to be purchasable by people.
Great. And if anyone has any questions, fire them in on the chat. Yeah, I will do basically Daniel's Digital.Health initiative is something that we're really excited about. Creating effectively a directory for all devices like this and all products. And we're at Health Hub, we're super supportive of it.
I would just say one thing on that, thanks, is that when we think about prescribing therapy now, you think about the drug or the device, and imagine the not so distant future when you've got a patient with AFib and heart disease and depression and a smoker, you'll, in your EMR will help you with guided decision-making to pick the right drugs for their hypertension based on their genomics and other data, but also might suggest the AliveCore device or the Current Health home device to track their blood pressure and other metrics. And then that data will automatically flow into your EMR, not just the data, but the insights that you need to see. And you'll get a ping every day of the 10 patients you need to call to get them back on track. So I think this digital health world beyond is not just a directory, but eventually the way to prescribe digital health solutions that integrate with all of care.
That's good. Question we got from on the reimbursement landscape and how it's, obviously there was a dramatic change a month and a half ago. And that was a favorable change for all these companies. But Paul, do you want to talk about that? Daniel, Xiao, does anyone want to pick that one up? I guess not, huh? Okay.
Anyone wants to. I mean, Daniel mentioned, reimbursement before. You're talking about reimbursement in telehealth?
Yes, reimbursement for telehealth for devices, how it's basically the question was, what's happened? How is it, how much, obviously reimbursement strategies, are a lot more money out there. There's a lot of change in the last year and a half.
Well, I think even some of our startups could talk about this because, their products are being covered in most cases. So, the reimbursements there's coverage for some of these technologies now. Telehealth in general is now covered. So, the landscape has dramatically changed. And that's also been another thing about in terms of pouring gas on the fire for these types of technologies. Before, no one knew how to pay for these things, and no one, whether it was a consumer, as you heard, some of these are consumer technologies that have pivoted to medical. So I think there's actually going to be great coverage for these technologies going forward, mainly because we finally have the data. I mean, one of the things that's so exciting about the opportunity that COVID has provided us, unfortunately, COVID's a horrible, disease that, that's affecting us all in many ways. But from a data opportunity, we actually have technology being deployed in a massive way that might have been a year or 2 years away from, really being able to achieve this kind of scale and validation without this kind of a need. So, just like Zoom is powering every one of these things these days, we have these RPM technologies in telehealth that has now become the norm, and I think it's going to be widely available. It's going to be covered. You don't have to pay co-pays for these things, and this stuff is just going to be available. So, we're in a really great era right now.
Yeah, no, I echo that. So, what a difference a year makes. When we started last year, when we did our first version of the Digital Health Awards, we had to spend all summer really digging to find half the companies. It was very difficult. A lot of these companies were just coming out. There weren't that many products in market. Within 1 year, we're looking at the landscape right now, and it's multiplied. There's not only are there more companies, there's so much more validation data. This area is truly exploding, and thank God, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't. It's creating a tremendous opportunity for these companies to help address the COVID crisis. Well, with that, I just wanted to. We're at 5 o'clock. It's important that these things end at time. I have up on the screen the fact that our upcoming schedule. Every 2 weeks, we're going to be doing one of these. So we're focusing on cardiology in 2 weeks. In a month from now, we're going to focus on cancer, and we're going to focus on companies building telehealth and remote devices that are basically changing these departments in these areas. I wanted to thank the 4 companies today. You guys were incredible. They're all having, and you've seen it on the chats, they're all having their private Zoom sessions, and I encourage you to spend time with them. We thought there were 4 amazing companies that really represented what is going on out there. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Xiao. Xiao, that was incredible work. And I think I saw so many heads nodding in the audience. Thank you very much. Everyone have a great evening. Thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Great event, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Good luck with it.
Thank you. Awesome.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Good ideas. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Very much.
Merci from Montreal.